Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Risk with Dr. Naveen Agarwal. Each week, we talk about a topic related to risk management of medical devices in a very casual and informal way. This is not a webinar or lecture. Rather, our goal is to talk about key topics and challenges in a very informal way and share best practices. I'm your host, Naveen Agarwal, and I'm the principal and founder at Achieve, where my personal mission is to help you achieve success in risk management. My guest in this episode is Marco Felsberger. He is an expert in supply chain resiliency and security risk management, primarily focused on the consumer electronics industry. In the medical device space also, supply chain resiliency and risk management is becoming very critical as medical devices become more complex and supply chains become more diverse and fragmented. So it was very timely and important conversation for us to understand how we should be thinking about building supply chain resiliency from the start using a systems design thinking approach. We had this conversation in front of a live audience as part of our weekly LinkedIn Live series. You're about to hear a recording of our conversation. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hello everyone, and welcome to our weekly Let's Talk Risk conversation. I'm so excited to see all of you. Many familiar faces in the audience today, but some of you are also joining for the first time. Welcome to all of you. Thank you so much. Show your reaction using the emojis, guys. I know some of you are already welcoming each other, thumbs up, and so on and so forth. We want this to be very engaging. And guys, know that this is a very casual and informal conversation. And I would love to have you participate in this discussion in about 10-15 minutes or so after I've had a chance to have an initial conversation with my guest today. Feel free to jump in and share any thoughts, comments, questions you might have on the topic or any other related topic. We are trying to engage with each other, connect with each other, and share our own knowledge and perspectives with each other. So with that, I'm gonna introduce my guest Marco Felsberger today to you. I'm so excited to have him on this conversation. Marco is not from our medical device industry, but he brings in such an amazing perspective on resiliency, risk resiliency, and why that is important. Guys, as you know, even our medical devices are becoming more complex. They are interconnected, interoperable, software, multiple components, multiple suppliers. Supply chains are becoming complex. And we recently heard about the Boeing issue as well, right? Supply chain issues. We are going to face this world where there'll be a lot of uncertainty in our own supply chain. So let's hear from Marco what are some of the challenges and best practices in having and making a resilient and secure supply chain. We'll get into that in just a bit. But Marco, I want to start by welcoming you and just thanks a lot for joining us today.
Hey Naveen, thanks for having me and I'm very excited to be here and looking forward to our conversation.
Great. And guys, Marco is joining us from Vienna in Austria. So I know it's a little bit late for him and I appreciate him taking the time to join us today. Marco, why don't you start by introducing yourself to our audience today?
Yes, of course. I've been working in the field of risk resilience and security management now for already almost 20 years. I started out as a paratrooper in the Austrian Army in the airborne unit, but this is quite some time ago, so I can't even remember vividly what it was like. So don't ask about that, please. And then I went on and started my career in the private sector, in banking. I was responsible for security risk management, and then I switched. I moved on at some time and joined a logistics company, a global forwarding company, and fell into the field of supply chain resilience. And this is what I'm doing now for the last years. And there's a lot of action currently in this field, and a very exciting field here.
That's awesome. So Marco, let's start talking about that. And I want to set the stage by just briefly discussing the recent Boeing issue. It was amazing for us to see. Imagine you are in that plane and 10,000 feet and a door blows open. Luckily, nobody got hurt, but it is a major issue. And I think people have traced it back to some problems with their supply chain and how the parts are coming in, they are being inspected or reworked. That is the extent of my understanding. Can you put this in perspective of how you see this from a supply chain resiliency point of view?
Sure. And the Boeing example is a very good example for my understanding of resilience, because it's so much more. Supply chain is one very important point of it. The more suppliers you have, the more tier N suppliers you have, and you have to control and manage somehow. That the more complicated it gets. Everyone working in the supply chain knows how it is. So at a certain point within the supply chain, you just receive some Excel, some spreadsheets with questions regarding risk mitigation and business continuity plans and whatever, and you're just ticking the box, and the rest is basically trust, and companies do not have the visibility, do not have the time to follow up that properly. Mm-hmm. And within the supply chain, at some point, devices or parts or whatever it is, it comes to your premises, and you have to check it. You have to do the maintenance and the incoming inspections and whatnot. But basically, you cannot find a system you have not built yourself. It's very hard to look into such a system and find all the underlying issues maybe. That's a big issue in the whole supply chain management and the whole in the whole industry. And I think Boeing suffered that and many more things when we think of misaligned incentives, for example.
Oh, okay. Can you say a little bit more about that? What do you mean by misaligned incentives?
There was an interesting paper I read. It was from Eric Holnagel. He's so to speak the father of resilience engineering, and he highlighted back then a case from NASA where they had some issues. I think in the early 2000s, and there was one specific case where NASA aimed for the goal better, cheaper, faster in their production. And of course, this has to do a lot with incentives, because people get incentivized to get their bonus based on these high level goals. And you can optimize for faster, very good. You can optimize for cheaper, very good. But it's much harder to optimize, to find indicators for better. And looking at that alone, you get the first feeling for where things could go south in the field of resilience, because when it starts at the top with misaligned incentives, everything else, the saying, show me the indicator, or show me the KPI, and I'll show you the result. And basically, this is where resilience has to start at this point, because everything mismanaged at the top is already an issue where you have a very hard time to cover it up in the operations.
Great. So I think we are talking about incentives at the OEM level now, but can you say a little bit more about misalignment and incentives even on the supplier side?
Misalignment on incentives on the supplier side. Sure. Very basic example. We have, for example, when we have high value shipments, we have KPIs we have to follow, and then, for example, to prevent cargo thefts. Basically, if you ship a lot of laptops or mobile phones or whatever it is, it's very expensive if you lose this stuff. And you get incentivized or disincentivized for leading indicators, and often it is the issue that the more, for example, in the field of cargo safety, if you park on unsecure parking, this is a real issue in Europe here. This could lead to a theft, and so parking on unsecure parking sites is a leading indicator for us. And the more you report that, the higher the pressure gets, maybe from your client, from your customer, and you as a supplier has an issue reporting that, because you want to do it, you have to do it. You need to do it, but the more you report, that the higher the pressure is, and there is then a tendency to do not report everything.
Yes, of course.
For example, these are things we have to think of and take care of as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm hearing you say is that from the supplier side also, they may not want to report everything to their customers they are supplying into, for fear of maybe financial issues or liability consequences or other issues. But there are sort of incentives on both sides, on each side. And when you multiply that by 8, 10, 20, 30 different suppliers, it becomes very complex and everyone is incentivized for something different, right? So having said that, I think one of the examples that I'm familiar with, which seems to be working reasonably well, is the automotive industry, where we have multiple tiers of suppliers, right? Can you say something about that and how maybe some of the resiliency practices have been implemented there? Do you have some examples that you could share on that side?
Yeah, the automakers, the automobile industry, there are I would say different examples because we have some German big companies, some big companies where the incentives are also not very well structured in a way that they are focusing very much on just-in-time deliveries. And we saw during COVID and the semiconductor shortage, for example, that they had a real issue selling parts because they could not finish them with the parts needed. And then we have other examples like Tesla, for example. They have now other issues for sure. But back then in the pandemic, and this is also a very good example in my view for resilience, they just switched the programming for the chips and could have used other semiconductors where other companies were not able to be that agile, for example. And they're looking at that. It's not sure how we link it now. This to the incentive. To the incentive part, but I think it's also how you treat on both ends, how you treat your suppliers at the end.
Yeah.
How the communication is. This is often not highlighted enough, I guess. How are you a good are you a good person to the other person on the phone, for example?
Yeah.
Do you pressure them or not, or are you a partner or are they just suppliers?
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Yeah. So guys, you can see that our conversation is an interesting one here. And those of you who are joining now a little bit later, let me tell you, we are talking about resiliency on the supply chain side and how it might be relevant in our medical device industry as well. My guest today is Marco Felsberger from Austria. He has a lot of experience on the logistics side. So Marco, before I open up for discussion, I want to touch upon a topic that you briefly mentioned in our conversation just before we went live. You were talking about applying systems thinking to achieve supply chain resiliency. Can you say a little bit about what you mean by systems thinking and where we might be falling a little bit short in our current approach to supplier risk management?
Sure. What we usually do, or what I see very often, is that we just focus on a single supplier, check the boxes, so to speak, make a risk assessment, check their business continuity plans, but we're only focusing on this specific supplier. Then we go to the next. We often do not link them and make the interconnections visible. And this is where systems thinking comes into play, because all these suppliers are nodes in the system, and the interaction is usually also very, or oftentimes more interesting than the nodes or the outage of the nodes, because once you modeled all your suppliers or your whole supply chain as a system, you can find out very interesting things like where are my bottlenecks, where is the constraint in the system, and this again helps a lot with supplier management, because once you have found the bottleneck or the constraint, you can focus your efforts on this field. Not managing all, 8,000 tier N suppliers, because this is not a feasible approach. We cannot assess the risks of all these suppliers. What we want to do in an interconnected world, in a complex system, is to find out where the music is. This is usually at the bottleneck or at the constraint, and there we focus everything. Or monitoring on it, we go more in details with our assessments, whatever it is. Have a better collaboration with them, whatever is needed, and this helps a lot. And in my view, this is one of the only reasonable ways to proceed if you have a broad supplier base, for example.
Got you. So, listening to this, it seems to me that there's an engineering side to managing suppliers and ensuring resiliency. It's not just about what we call supplier quality assurance or inspections or audits. They are after the fact, but we have to design a system of supplier management, which is utilizing systems thinking. Am I hearing you correctly that way?
Yeah, spot on. So that's what I try to promote, and what I try to shout out in the world in on LinkedIn and wherever they let me talk, because this is the interesting part. When we have for me, resilience is a systemic characteristic. It's not necessarily, of course, it's like a fractal. You have the single nodes or the single supplier who needs to be resilient as well, but the overall system we have to focus on and look at, because once we get this in a way that they can digest disruptions or perturbations, then we are much better off, and we do not need to be to assess risks as precisely what we cannot do anyway in a complex world. But then we have a lot more buffer, redundancy, whatever it is, to deal with uncertainty.
This is really quite interesting, and I see Kevin Posey is in the audience today. We had a conversation on a similar topic with Kevin a few weeks ago, I think. The recording of that conversation is now available, going to be in a week or so. But we talked about the gap that exists in our medical device industry today when design and development is done in the R&D function, and the supplier quality aspects of it is kind of, in a different silo, and not really connected very well with the design process, at least in our industry. So what you are saying is that we have to look at the whole system at one time, and components and parts and services from suppliers are an essential input to our design process, and we have to apply design thinking. So I think we are touching upon a theme that is very relevant in our industry as well, Marco. So I appreciate your thoughts on this. Guys, I'm going to start opening up for a conversation here. So all are welcome. All you have to do is just raise your hand, and I'll bring you on the stage virtually. We don't have to wait your turn. Raise your hand if you're interested, because you're already indicating you want to join us. Just hang in there. So I will invite you. It doesn't have to be a question, guys. It's not a Q&A or a webinar or a lecture. It is more about sharing your perspective and feedback and anything you are curious about. What do you see in your world that you are concerned about from a supplier quality or a resiliency point of view? So we can have a very open conversation here. I'm going to start bringing you guys up, and again, all are welcome. So Vikas, Roger, and Rafael. Let's see. Great. Vikas, you are first, so please unmute your mic and share what you have in mind.
Yeah, thanks for this interesting discussion. My question is related to the terms risk and resilience. Of course, it seems they are not complementary terms, but then is risk is part of resilience, or resilience is part of risk?
Great question, Marco. Can you share some thoughts on that? Indeed, a great question, and a lot of people are discussing it, and it goes even further, because they're discussing if risk management is how it belongs to business continuity management, and then what is the difference between business continuity management and resilience management. And there are a lot of distinctions. For me, this is only my definition, or that's which helps me think about resilience. Resilience is a systemic characteristic. So if I remove one node, one supplier, and the whole system is still functioning, my supply chain is still functioning, this is resilience. Risk management is what I apply to specific suppliers, where I say, okay, well, what is the risk that they come under financial duress, or whatever it is, or what's the natural disaster risk there. For the individual nodes, this is where I apply it and how I would distinguish it. I hope that helped.
It makes a lot of sense, Marco. And just to clarify for everybody who may not be familiar with terminology, what you're describing, a node is part of a system, and a node is represented here by individual supplier. And there are connectivity, interactions, and you are trying to see how the system is behaving. And if you take one node out or one supplier, some discontinuity there, what happens? So to me, what you're describing briefly, risk management will include your activities to ensure resilience, right? That could be part of the one way to look at that. Okay, Roger, please unmute your mic and share what you have in mind. Go ahead.
Well, I found it very interesting what Marco was saying about how do you measure better and faster, cheaper, better. And I'm hoping you can elaborate on that in the sense that you've probably thought a lot about this, and maybe you have some advice for companies on how to have a better KPI to look at quality or a better performance. So I'm hoping you could expand on that and fill my brain with some ideas.
I will try. Unfortunately, I have no no secret sauce here. What I usually try to do is that I pair indicators. So once it's perfectly okay that a company has to be efficient and has to earn money. That's without any doubt. What I try to do then, when I'm responsible for designing a resilient system, what I try to do is to pair it with the relevant partner. So if it's a safety critical system like the planes, the Boeing airplanes are, I would pair efficiency with some relevant quality counterpart, or with some safety counterpart, whatever it is, because this is important to make it visible. Mm-hmm. You do not want to drift into a situation like I imagine happened with Boeing, where you drift into an area where you have no room for error left, because the more efficient you get, at some point you're at the boundary of failure, and this is what you want to avoid. And the balancing indicator should help to put the efficiency goal into perspective. This would be one thing I would approach it. Or another one, when I may add, is when you do system modeling, you have reinforcing and balancing feedback. So you have the incentives, and you think them through with your team and say, okay, look, we have now the incentive of faster. Okay, to what can it lead? Okay, faster would mean maybe they are not as focused on quality as it should be, or on safety as it should be. And then once you find all the reinforcing feedback loops, you have also an indication that this could be an indicator or incentive which is going in the wrong direction. I hope that made sense a bit.
This does, Marco, and it seems to me that what you are describing is no different than what systems engineers might already be used to doing in our design and development space when they design medical products, right? They are looking at inputs and outputs, and they are trying to model the system's performance. So what you mentioned is we can do a lot of what-if scenarios in the supply chain model. What-if scenarios linking different KPIs and predict the trajectory of each KPI if we change one input, right? That's what you're saying. So the engineer in me, by the way, is excited about this. I'm so geeked out about this. I love this conversation. But let's keep moving, guys. Rafael, I'm gonna invite you now to please share your thoughts.
Yeah, I was thinking in regard to supply chain resiliency, one big area where I've had to deal with that is in software, specifically in medical device software development. Having come off the SAMD project, and pretty much everything I've done over the last 10 years, having some degree of software input, the supply chain controls and validation on that is a whole other thing. So, and it changes very quickly. So I guess for Marco, my question is, how would you deal with that kind of volatility, especially where you really don't have any control over what somebody else is going to do? And what's your thoughts on how you stay on top of something that's moving very, very quickly?
Excellent question, and for me, just have to say I have no experience in software development, and I just know that there are some regulations upcoming in Europe for the banking sector as well, for example, where you have to track your software supply chain, and this is really hard. And the only idea I have is when I plan, for example, I had to do a business continuity plan for a longer lasting power outage here in Europe, because this is one risk identified from the government as well, and we had to plan what to do if we are 24 hours, for example, or longer without energy, without power supply. And there you have to deal with a distant but similar thing is you do not have any control on everything you have not thought of before. Once it happened and you have no communication, it must work. And this is only the connection which I got when you raised your question or your statement. You have to plan a system in a way that it has a chance to survive and is very robust to issues. And I read once a book which I just can recommend. I cannot give direct examples from it because it's quite some time ago. But it was about chaos engineering, and it is about software engineering and how you build software systems to do what you described, to withstand user errors or things you cannot foresee. But more I cannot add, unfortunately.
Sure, Marco. If you send me that reference to the book, I'm going to post that in the event page so people can take a look at it. Great. Let's continue our conversation, guys. Ed, you have joined us, so please unmute your mic and share what you have in mind.
Yes, this is an interesting discussion, Marco and Naveen, because many years ago I worked in supplier management, and I was actually the head of supplier quality. And we had three things that we measured each supplier, and by default, then that was what each purchasing agent was measured on. And the first element was quality. What was the quality of the product we were buying? Did it meet our requirements? The second thing was delivery. Did it arrive on time? And believe it or not, the third thing, the one at the bottom of the list, was cost. We felt that if we had a quality product that was delivered on time, the rest of it would work out okay. And the cost is important. There's no doubt about it. But that's how we rated our suppliers. And we wanted to have a couple of suppliers for each product, but many of the things that we bought were sole source because it was our design. Mm-hmm. But we had a backup supplier that had that capability, mm-hmm. But it was the way we managed things. So while the cost of doing business is important in the whole scene of things, the risk part kind of overrides the whole thing. Mm-hmm. You've got to have the safety first, which is part of the quality section, mm-hmm. and then you go to the delivery. Is it there? If it's not there, you can't ship the product. So that's important. Yeah. And then the cost falls down at the bottom of those three.
Great. So I heard two key points here, Ed, and first of all, fantastic summary here. What you are describing is really creating an incentive structure in the appropriate way, emphasizing safety and quality first, right? You're saying that very clearly and consistent with what Marco talked about. And the second thing you're talking about is actually you are building resilience by having backup suppliers to even the parts or components that are being designed and sole sourced, right? So you are thinking of resiliency and making sure that if one supplier goes out of business, you have some other supplier to fall onto. So that's great.
Let me give you an example, Naveen,
sure,
of a situation that we were in. We had a plastic injection molder supplier that on Saturday, their building caught on fire and was destroyed. Mm-hmm. The owner of the business, of course, showed up when the fire occurred and got the fire department to spray the area where the molds were to make sure that the molds were kept cool. Mm-hmm. By the time they could get into the building to get the molds out, they took them to a tool and die maker to have them all checked to make sure they were still good. That was on Sunday. Okay, mm-hmm. The fire's on Saturday. This is on Sunday. On Monday, they transferred them to another company, and it was part of they had a multiple company operation. You know, it was over management of 3 different injection molded suppliers. So on Monday, they started manufacturing our parts that were due on Tuesday because we operated just in time. The truck pulled up on time to the dock with those parts, even though that whole operation had burned to the ground.
Awesome.
So, yeah, that's
awesome.
Having backup.
That's a great example of resiliency. Guys, so we have run out of time. I'm going to give Marco a couple of minutes to, just think about 2 or 3 key takeaway points that we can take away from this conversation. But I want to share with you just 2 very quick announcements. First of all, especially those of you who are new, I want to invite you to check out my Let's Talk Risk newsletter. I will share a link here in the event page. And the good news there is I'm actually launching a brand new section on my website, which is connected to the newsletter, on QMSR compliance from the perspective of risk management. Risk is going to be very, very important in QMSR. So we're going to be talking about a lot of different things in the coming year or so in the near future. So you are invited to check that out. The second announcement is next week I'm doing a webinar, a special webinar that I do every month for my members at Let's Talk Risk. We're going to be talking about a case study where there was an issue in estimating risk and how it led to a decision problem. And we're going to have time for your specific Q&A. So these are some of the things that we are doing outside of this Friday conversation, and I invite you to be a part of that as well. With that, Marco, the floor is open to you. Please share just 2 or 3 key takeaway points from today.
Yeah, thanks. First, let me say that it was really fun and I really enjoyed it. What are my key takeaways? So first, we have to start to think more in systems and get an end-to-end view on our activities, whatever it may be. Is it a supply chain or operations or research and development? This is a very important one because it switches it turns a switch, so to speak, and we see new perspectives and new risks. It's like a pair of glasses you put on. And another important thing is what you just heard from Edwin, which was very, very beautifully stated, is there are hidden costs for risk, so we have to pay them eventually. But even if we think we are saving, not paying attention to quality or to risk management, mitigations or whatever it is, at the end, at some point we have to pay the price, and that's usually or often not cheaper than incorporating it from the beginning. So this would be my last statement here.
Wonderful, thank you, Marco. And guys, just let us know how you are feeling. How did you feel about this conversation? Use the emoji icons to share your feelings and thoughts about this. And be a part of this conversation. I invite you to engage, connect, and network. Did you know that anybody on this audience today, in the window that you see, you can reach out to them. Please don't spam them, otherwise I'll get in trouble. But you can connect with others. That's the whole point of these conversations. Marco, thank you so much, and everybody who shared their thoughts today, Roger, Vikas, Rafael, and Ed, thanks to all of you. I really appreciated this conversation. I hope you enjoyed it too. And I look forward to connecting with you once again. Oh, by the way, before I forget, we are not going to be meeting next week. I have another personal commitment. I can't do it next week. But we will come back the Friday after next week with another wonderful conversation with from a clinical expert who is in a very leadership position at a medical device organization. So it'll be interesting to see his perspective on integrating clinical and medical expertise in the risk management process. So keep an eye on the announcement that will go out on LinkedIn. With that, thanks again, everybody, and we will see you soon. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.